Hello, everyone. I'm here with Courtney Muchugu. She has been on a NEMTAC advisory board. She has operated an NEMT company for 10 years, and she currently consults for NEMT companies.
If your drivers are sitting in the car or on break more than they are driving, you got to look at how you can kind of like fill in their time with more trips.
Okay.
So that might mean if you're doing private pay, adding a broker. If you're just working with a broker, it might mean, and you only want to work with brokers, it might mean adding additional contracts or doing a little bit of private pay.
What I think is generally understood is that working with brokers, you can get a high volume of trips, right? Like you go to whatever local brokers are in your area, you sign up with them. But I think winning private pay work is probably the more difficult thing to do.
Right.
Can you give us some tips on how you've done it, like the NEMT companies that you consult for, like how you advise them to do it?
Sure. So everyone's human, right? And most of the time, transportation is a solution to a problem, right? So I think if you're going into a facility that does their own transportation or is having an issue with transportation, the best way to go in there is just talk to them like a human, figure out what their problems are, if you can realistically do anything to solve them, because sometimes you can ruin your reputation as a company by overpromising services as well. So it's really important to have an understanding of what you're capable of providing. And that is one benefit of starting with a broker, is that you get to build your reputation as a company, and you get to kind of establish a footprint before you maybe start going into private pay. So
how do you have that conversation with facilities so that you're not actually overpromising?
It depends on the facility and who you're working with, right? I would recommend to talk to them and let them know, I'm really interested in doing business with you. Right now, we're only able to do, this amount. We can create a plan though, or, that plan might take 1, 2, 3 months, right? It might take a quarter, it might take a full year. And we can take over, your transportation needs fully. So you'd have to talk to that person and figure out what they're willing to do, what their comfort level is with it. But I think if there's a will, there's a way. And again, talking to someone like they're human, and just trying to work with someone, people usually are willing to negotiate. They might be actually hesitant to jump in fully with all their transportation needs. So going at a slower approach like that might be more appealing to them. But until you have that conversation, you won't know.
Okay. I'm going to ask you to tell stories, if you can, of how you actually win private pay work from facilities. Signing up with the broker is a relatively easy thing to do, but if you want to go and get facility work, you have to actually probably walk physically into that facility, go find a human being who manages the transportation needs of the facility, and have some sort of conversation with them. That's a little harder than just signing up with a broker, right? How have you actually done it? Are there any stories you can share of times that it's worked out for you, times that it hasn't worked out for you to try to win private pay work from facilities?
So you have to do your research first of all and see how the health insurance payments goes in your state and in your market, because sometimes it might not make sense for a facility to do to work with a transportation company. I know for me one time, I spent a lot of time researching and looking up companies and trying to schedule meetings. And I ended up just driving by a facility and I saw they had their own vans and with their own logos on it. And I decided to just go in and ask the director, a little bit more. I said, so are you guys doing your own transportation? And he said, yes. And it just so happens they were trying to expand at the same time, and they were really looking to reduce costs, and for them, eliminating transportation at that time, was something that they needed to do.
Okay.
So
So you just had the
It
conversation
was, yeah, it
and
was just a
then,
random, we just drove by and had a conversation. And it just so happens he was looking, to reduce costs and expand to a second location. So
okay.
the timing was right.
Wow.
I feel like it's a game of statistics though. So you have to call enough and walk into enough places before you get a yes. You're going to get a lot of no's.
Okay. And then when you actually like, oh, so first you're like calling them on the phone before walking in and trying to have a meeting?
You can do a mixture.
Okay.
Some places you could walk into and you'll find that the director or the manager is never available. You might have better luck calling.
Okay. And like, who do you think is usually the right person to actually talk to at a facility? Like, is it like some of the nursing staff sometimes, or is it always like the manager, or who actually do you try to get in touch with?
Sure. So the titles I've noticed in a lot of the facilities will vary.
Okay.
But I usually don't talk to the nurses. I'll usually ask to speak with the manager, the director, or the manager, the director, the coordinator, some sort of a title that shows that they have a general authority over the whole operations.
Finding, new systems that have more features over time. Can we dig into that a bit more? What do you sort of mean by that? Can you give examples?
Sure. So for us, it might have been fuel cards, giving, if you have fuel cards that you're giving your drivers, what kind of system is behind that? What can you do on their platform? Can it integrate with your tracking softwares? And even for your tracking softwares, what features does the tracking software have on there? So depending on what you need as a business, you can get into, initially get into a tracking platform, right? In an agreement with a company who does tracking. And a couple years later, another company comes out that's cheaper and offers twice the amount of features and would probably be a better option. But if you're not constantly like researching, you're not going to find that out. And there's a reason why huge, Fortune, 500 companies invest so much money into research and development. It's because it's important. So
Yeah.
like this industry is no different. Like you constantly, like as an owner, have to invest your time into researching and developing for the company.
Okay. So let's say you're either a new NEMT company or an NEMT company that has been around for not very long, and you realize that you need to do these things. You need to find like new software systems that have the features that'll bring your business to the next level and whatnot. But maybe you're not the best at researching and going and finding out, right? Like there are other NEMT companies out there who are doing these good practices, right? Like if I'm an NEMT owner, how do I find who those companies are and what systems they're using if I want to do the same thing that they're doing, right? And emulate their best practices? Like, how do I even find out about that stuff?
Sure. So I think joining an organization like NEMTAC is really important. They're the only accrediting company, in the United States for NEMT, and they're a really valuable resource. They're invaluable. They're so valuable. So they have the yearly conference where you're going to have owner operators from all throughout the country join together, as well as brokers and people from health plans. And if you're in a local market, NEMT companies can be very competitive. They might not want to share, who they're working with and who they're receiving services from and how they're saving money. So when you go to one of these conferences and you're able to interact on a national scale with other owner operators, you don't feel that local competition, right?
Yeah.
And you're able to talk to people and have like really good valuable conversations. And I think you end up leaving, with a lot of resources. So I think joining something like NEMTAC, attending transportation conferences is really important. Reaching out to brokers. Sometimes you could reach out to a broker and the broker knows which companies that the other transportation companies are working with. And they'll be able to say, hey, we have, 5 companies that are working with so-and-so tracking company, and you might want to check them out.
Okay.
So just talking to your broker as well and having a good relationship with them could be helpful.
Yeah, that's pretty key because I mean, not every NEMT owner can actually go to the annual NEMTAC conference. It's a great conference, but for the people who it's maybe not accessible to, they're just not available to go or whatnot. The broker, you're saying, is a good source to get these kinds of tips. Anyone else?
I would still check out the NEMTAC website. Sometimes they'll have a lot of helpful information. A lot of their sponsors as well, could be good resources.
Okay.
I would also check out CTAA and the Transportation Alliance. Even though they don't specialize in NEMT, they still have a lot of valuable resources. Even if you're just doing private pay, reaching out to a broker in your community could be helpful. It could be worth having a conversation with.
Okay.
Because they will know what's going on in the industry and they'll know what resources are available because their companies are using them.
Cool.
And of course, like joining online webinars and seeing what people are talking about.
Since I started Bambi, almost every single NEMT company I've talked with says that one of the most difficult things for them to do at this time is find drivers.
Right.
I'm sure you've experienced that. NEMT companies you consult for experience it. Like, how do you actually find qualified drivers and recruit them?
It would be a lot easier if brokers paid more, honestly. Okay. I think it's wrong that a lot of contracts, the pricing has either gone down or made the same since minimum wage has changed so frequently year after year. So I don't think that's fair on companies. I think that we'd be able to retain drivers a lot easier, as well as find qualified and decent drivers a lot easier if the pay was higher. And that's why I think you see a lot of people running from brokers to private pay because of that. So as far as finding qualified drivers, given that situation, referrals always work well. If you have a driver that works really well and you have a referral program in place, that helps. And just constantly posting your job ad, whether that be on, Indeed or ZipRecruiter, just utilizing different job hiring platforms and being persistent.
Okay.
Also, from my experience when I was posting on Indeed, I noticed that I wasn't getting a lot of clicks initially. And I would always get a call from one of the people from Indeed who said, I'm your account specialist and I can help you. And for a long time, I had ignored that. And the day that I actually took the call and made time for her, my views went up like crazy, and we were able to hire a lot more drivers because they're able to.
Okay.
They give you really good advice on how to title your job ad, or whatever you want to label it as, your help ad.
Yeah.
Whatever, driver ad. So they'll give you good advice on how to title it, what to put in, what to leave out. And I feel like after that, it was very easy for me. I was able to get a lot more likes and not likes, but what's it called? Views, a lot more views, a lot more applications.
Okay.
And
this is Indeed.com.
Yeah, this was Indeed. So Indeed is very expensive. So I know a lot of people also, hesitate to use it, but it is, for me, it worked well. Craigslist is always going to be there.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. So Indeed.com, Craigslist. Referrals from your existing drivers.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you might have, if you go to New York or you go to LA, there's so many different job posting platforms that are popular based on what area that you're living in as well. So it's just important to be familiar with that. Here in Worcester, Massachusetts, Indeed and Craigslist might be, the best, options here. But if you go to another city, it might be something different. And that's why researching and understanding the market that you're in is really important.
Okay. So you do that, you use those platforms and you find applicants. The thing with NEMT is though, not everyone who's a driver can be an NEMT driver because NEMT requires more skills, right? A driver has to be able to go door through door sometimes. They have to be able to handle wheelchair passengers. They have to have the training on how to handle, these kinds of medical transport trips. Has that ever been an issue for you in, being able to try to filter, just anyone who can be a driver versus someone who can be an NEMT driver? And how do you filter through that and find, the difference?
Absolutely. It's just you have to invest the time into it. Out of 100 applicants, you might get 10 interviews. Out of those 10 interviews, 5 people might show up, and out of those 5, you're lucky if you hire one,
Okay.
I mean, you gotta be persistent. You gotta keep going, be open and upfront with people over the phone, about what kind of a job it is and what the requirements are, and ask them if they're interested. Give them a reasonable timeline. The reason why I always say not to overpromise is that's what I hear so many companies in this industry do, is that they overpromise people things. And once an employee can detect that you're overpromising, or an applicant detects that you're overpromising them, it turns them off, from the job. So just be realistic. Be honest, for me to hire you would take about, 4 weeks. And some people pay for training, some people don't. Some people hire as, independent contractors, some people hire as employees. So you just have to be upfront about your process and be open, and be persistent. You might not have luck immediately with hiring. It might take some time. If you're a newer company, I would think it's really good to just make sure that you start off by hiring drivers that are well trained and are safe drivers, and maintain a really good driving history for your company. Set yourself up for future success, because if you start having a lot of claims, you can't really recover from that overnight. It's very difficult. And talk to your agent, see if there's any local programs or what they recommend to reduce your rate. Okay. So it might be as simple as, hey, the next time that you guys decide to, renew the lease on your garage, why don't you look at this town instead? Because it would bring down your insurance costs, by thousands of dollars. And depending on how many vehicles you're running, obviously that cost can be more substantial. If you're saving, $500 to $1,000 a car and you have 40 vehicles, it looks a lot different than if you're running only a couple cars.
Yeah. Okay.
You can also consider whether or not you really need comprehensive and collision. So analyzing all of those and just working close with, your agency.
So that sounds like a big decision, deciding whether or not you even need comprehensive and collision insurance.
Right.
How do you really make that decision?
For us, we never felt like we needed it because we're working with our own shop. So if you have 40 vehicles, right, and let's say I'm just throwing out numbers, but let's say you have a vehicle and the insurance for a year without comprehensive and collision is $5,000, with it is $8,000 a year. So that's 3,000 times 40 vehicles. How likely is it that you're going to go through that much money in comprehensive and collision?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? We're throwing money out the window. We're better off replacing every single one of those cars,
Yeah.
if something were to happen to them.
The math checks out.
Yeah. So, and those are just random numbers, so don't quote me on those, but you have to really analyze and see whether or not it makes sense. If you're running newer vehicles and you have a lease or a loan on them, you might have to do comprehensive and collision, and you don't have a choice. So you might have to look maybe, at what you could, maybe what else could you take away from that? Maybe you just don't need rental, coverage for that. Maybe you don't need roadside assistance with that. Maybe you have your, another program on the side. So just, really looking at your plan, your insurance plan, having your agency look over it and bringing that to another agency and having them look over it and give a second opinion on it. Much like how you'd go to a second, another doctor for a second opinion if you had a major, if you had a major medical problem,
Yeah. What are the creative ways that you try to, keep your insurance rates low?
Picking and choosing more where you pick work, avoiding certain cities and towns. If you do work in the Boston area, for example, in Massachusetts, your rates are going to be much higher.
This is interesting. So would you like
Your
sort of
insurance,
decide to not take trips in a certain region because the
Exactly.
insurance would be higher?
yeah, it wouldn't be worth it. Yeah, because your insurance company for this, they ask for a copy of your trip records, right? They don't need the client's name or anything like that, but they want to know which towns, like where is the vehicle traveling to, pickup and drop offs.
Okay.
So if they see that you're going East Boston, go out of business. It's too expensive, way too expensive. But, if they see that you're going to like a lot of the smaller towns, it's going to be less expensive. So it might not make sense for you to pick up an extra handful of trips in the Boston area because it's going to make your insurance rate just go up so much more.
So would you then recommend, like, if someone really wanted to like be diligent about their insurance costs and profitability, like they should really strategically think about what kinds of locations in their area that they're doing trips in, like maybe avoid urban areas?
Absolutely. So I'm not saying to avoid urban areas, right? Because for some people they have to.
Yeah.
But if you work with your insurance agency and they said, okay, like the lowest rates in this state are going to be in these areas, they're the lowest for a reason, right? So not only are you going to get lower insurance rates, your drivers are probably actually going to be less likely to get in an accident over there, right?
Yeah.
So you're setting yourself up a little bit better for success,
Yeah.
in that regard, if you're a smaller company, and like I said, sometimes like you have to work in Boston or you're going to have to work in that larger city that has the larger rates. And then at that point, maybe just ask, okay, what zip codes should I avoid? Or, is there anything else I can do? Maybe if I garage them, at night or over the weekend in a different area, does that help?
Email us at contact@bambi.health and we will get all of your questions responded to by email.